All right. Good morning and welcome to everyone who is joining us today from around this fair region, Australia, New Zealand, and perhaps even beyond. Good morning to you, good afternoon, and good evening. So, Brad Rylett is my name, Master Trainer here at Crucial Dimensions, and also the Learning Experience Lead. Today, we're going to have a good look at Crucial Conversations for Accountability, one of my favourite programs that we've been delivering around the world now for quite a number of years. So today, I want to challenge each and every one of you to sit back, relax, and get a sense of what this is like. We're going to provide you with quite an interactive experience via the chat, of course. We only have 45 minutes of valuable time, so let's get right into it. At the moment, it looks like we have nearly 20 people in our group today. We had 100 registrations this morning, so I'm expecting there will be people joining us along the way. The challenging thought is that the job of the leader is not to hold people accountable always, it is to develop accountable people. Occasionally, of course, we do need to engage in those accountability conversations. So let's have a look at what that might mean this morning. First, before we start, I just want to share with you Crucial Dimensions history in this regard. Crucial Dimensions has been the exclusive licensee for Crucial Learning across Australia and New Zealand for some 14 years, and I've had the privilege to be involved in that 14-year journey. We are delivering training that is evidence-based, and we have our 5 primary programs, which many of you will be familiar with, particularly Crucial Conversations for Mastering Dialogue. But we deliver these other programs as well. And this one today is all about accountability. So resolving, discussing, even transforming relationships where there might be a gap or a problem with poor performance, violated or awkward expectation not being met, or a broken commitment. So this, of course, these principles and skills that we have worked with for many, many years and developed and continue to develop, of course, apply across life, not just in the workplace. So with that in mind, let's have a look at our outline for this morning. Crucial Conversations for Accountability. Why is that important? Why is that significant? Our common approach, a new mindset and a new practice is what we'd like to share with many of you today, even if you've been using or applying our Crucial Conversations for Mastering Dialogue or Crucial Influence or Getting Things Done. Even if you've been doing that for some time with us, with our support, there's another dimension to consider when it comes to human relationships that are fit for purpose, that deliver wonderful outcomes. And we'll have a quick look at the delivery outline for you as well. Some of our ongoing research continues to validate this statement. The health of any relationship, team, organization, or enterprise can be measured fundamentally by the delay or lag in identifying problems and discussing them. Please just think about that for yourself. How long have you had a problem, if you will, a gap between what you expect and what you're experiencing with another person in your organization or indeed in your family and community life as well? That lag, that delay is one of the number one predictors for high human performance teams and enterprises. So let's get right into this and have a look at this situation. So we've got a situation here with Lynn and Murray. Lynn's the manager on the left-hand side of your screen. Murray's one of her team. What would you consider doing in these circumstances? Would you consider yourself skilled in handling a situation like this? I want to encourage you to use the chat and just tell us what you might do. What would you do next? How would you be thinking and feeling in this moment? So let's use our chat to add your thoughts as we watch this particular video. Here we go.
Hey, Murray, got a minute?
Yeah, what's up?
Just wanted to catch up with you about the launch items you committed to finish.
Okay, didn't you get the update I just sent? I'll have it done and send it to Lisa tomorrow.
Oh, actually, some of the items were due to Lisa yesterday, and she said she hasn't gotten them yet. Look, I'm managing about 50 actions with a ton of dependencies. Launch isn't too far off.
Yeah, I know. Everything's rushed, just like always. Look, I'm buried here. I'm gonna have to work late tonight just to get this stuff done for tomorrow. Not to mention all the other stuff I've got to do.
So please share your voice in the chat. What would you be thinking in this moment if you were Lynn here on screen? How would you be feeling? What would be your approach to dealing with this? Please share your thoughts in the chat. Love to hear how you would approach this gap between expectation and observed behavior or performance or experience in this moment with Murray. What would you be thinking and feeling? How might you respond to that? Thanks, Kerry. Feeling frustrated? I think completely understandable. Yep. Thanks, Marina. Not listening. Frustrated. Yes. Hadn't communicated this delay earlier. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Carolyn. Good to have you here with us. Jacqueline, thank you. First thought is she didn't get her attention or actually ask for the conversation. Maybe so. And Jeff is saying, thank you, Jacqueline. And Jeff is even saying, I feel I got brushed off. Maria suggesting move it away from the workplace. Ask, how can I help? Thanks, Bradley. Yep, it does sound that way, Celia. Sounds like she's got a lot going on for sure. Thank you, Matt. I'd be thinking Murray doesn't want to engage and has challenges with multiple issues. Need to see what's causing the delay. That's exactly right. What's causing the challenge? Is she snowed under or not able to express she's struggling? So thank you very much to all of you for those comments, and they're very understandable. There's a shift we need to consider here in our thinking, our mindset, if you wish to call it that, our way of interpreting this circumstance, this situation. And I want to capture that in an expression that we use quite regularly, which is to shift our mindset, the way we interpret our circumstances, situations, and the people included in them, from one of judgment to one of curiosity. Please just grab a hold of that for the rest of our 40-odd minutes together. So shifting our thinking and our interpretation from one of judgment of others to one of curiosity about what's going on for that other person, and curiosity about myself as well, my part in this as well. Thanks, Noriko. It needs to prioritize task, maybe. Need to talk. Yes, asking what else she has on and does she need help to prioritize, says Damien. Thank you for those thoughts and those comments. So first and foremost, I'm encouraging us to focus on our own thinking before we start judging what's going on for that other person. Am I trying to judge or am I curious about that's what's going on here? Let's continue in the interests of moving forward. So a gap. I have an expectation. Lynn has an expectation of her team member, Murray. And this is potentially what she's experiencing, this variation. It's not a straight linear progression of delivery and performance. It's a variation, as is true for all of us, pretty much all the time. So these gaps are what we're talking about between expectation and experience or observed performance and behavior. That's what we're addressing. Now, here's some examples. I want to encourage you to have a quick look at these professional and personal gaps that you may have experienced or may be experiencing in your life. Just take a moment to cast your eye across those. If you can relate to any of those, just give me a quick thumbs up in the chat, an emoticon, an emoji, a reaction in the chat. Or if you can't, put a Y for yes or an N for no. Thank you, Gary. Thanks, Jessica. That's it. Thanks, Jacqueline. Yep. There's almost always something, a little list that's there on our page that most people can relate to. Certainly that's been my experience. So for those of you who may not be familiar with our Crucial Conversations for Mastering Dialogue program, here's a definition, if you will. This is our standard description of what makes up a crucial conversation. Essentially, these elements are involved. The stakes are high, there's opposing opinions, and there's strong emotions. Let's just take those briefly, one at a time, so we're all on the sort of same page here. What we mean by the stakes are high is that there is a result that you're looking for, you need, you and your colleagues are trying to achieve in your team or enterprise, and that result is at risk of not being delivered. So the result is at risk. But we all kind of appreciate, I'm sure, even in this technologically driven age that we operate in, that all of those results are dependent upon people, and culture. The normalized routines and responses, reactions, the ways of thinking and the ways of behaving, the ways of communicating, the ways of listening to one another in our relationships that are focused on those results. So what's at stake here as a result that's at risk of not being delivered? And a relationship or many relationships that are under stress, duress, or distress. These relationships are not where they need to be or could be. The potential in you and I working together is suffering. We're not as engaged. We're not together. We're not collaborating. We're not working together. What we're doing is we're moving further apart. Perhaps we don't treat each other particularly well. Perhaps we remain silent for fear of how we might be punished or what the retribution might be if we speak our mind or our concerns or share our best thinking. So there's a lot in this, my friends, and thank you for all those thumbs up that I can see in the chat there. Now, when we get to opposing opinions, we're also talking about gaps here. Commonly gaps like disappointment. I was expecting this from Brad, and I got something different, something less often than what I expected, just like we saw Lynn and Murray. Disappointments, it may be disagreements. We disagree on how a job should be completed or instruction should be performed, or indeed how we deliver the execution of a corporate strategy to improve our positioning in a market, our service delivery to our customers, and so on, or how we meet our regulatory requirements in our environment. So opposing views. Now, one would argue that's it can be also expressed as difference. It can be expressed as diversity. But nevertheless, there's opposition, there's difference. And so some of the gaps that we often associate with opposing opinions are covered by disappointments, disagreements, and misunderstandings. I'm sure all of you, and in fact, I've been doing this far too long in some ways, but over my last 25 years of delivering these programs, every time I ask the question, has any of you got a disappointment or a disagreement or a misunderstanding that's going on in your life? And rarely do people not put their hands up. So it's a very common human experience. And of course, when those two elements are involved, our emotion, which is the substance, our emotion emerges out of our way of interpreting our circumstance, our mindset, if you will. It gets stronger and stronger. The longer the delay, the more time that passes, the stronger our emotion gets. And of course, the disengagement occurs. And sometimes relationships, of course, break. All right, let's move on. So let's look at some of the skills that we teach and share in crucial conversations for accountability. Now, here's the learner guide. So this just gives you a quick sense of how we do this. We've got a very substantial program that we deliver in a variety of ways, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. We have a 2-day delivery and a 1-day delivery specifically for people who have graduated from Mastering Dialogue. And some of the components are similar, so or the same. So let's have a look at one of the skills that is the same in Mastering Dialogue and our accountability program. It's called unbundling the circumstance, the situation that you face, the gap, with something called CPR. So let's have a quick look at CPR and see how that might be helpful to you, see how you might find this. So often what happens when we have these crucial conversations is that we choose the wrong conversation. Now, the word wrong is sometimes problematic. I like to use the word less effective. It doesn't help us move towards the results through the relationships that matter. So we choose a less effective, a more defensive kind of conversation to hold, one that puts us, the leader, the manager, the supervisor, at apparently less social or structural risk. So what I'd like to do now is just share with you what we mean by CPR. CPR stands for content, pattern, and relationship. These are 3 different elements, levels, if you want to think of it that way, in a potential conversation about a performance gap, a behavior gap, or an expectation gap. If it's a content, it's a single instance, the first occurrence of that gap between you and that other person, or you and a team, whatever. If there's a pattern, then it's a recurring experience over time. And if it's relationship based, then it means there's a level of trust or competence that becomes a question in that relationship. Content, pattern, and relationship. So with those in mind, let's have a look at a circumstance. Let's look at this one. What would you talk about here? life gets complicated, right? What would you talk about here? Well, you've recently been assigned an additional person to your project team. Let's call them Brad. That's me here. I'm on your team now, wherever you are. You've worked with them in the past, but they haven't been too reliable. You give them an assignment, they agree to do it, and say they were on track when you check in with them, but then they would miss the due date on their deliverables. That's me. You've tried to talk with Brad about this before, but Brad's pretty funny and uses humor to get out of conversations that he finds uncomfortable, especially when it's perceived at least as negative feedback. So Brad has just missed their latest deadline and he's trying to joke his way out of it over email, not in person, remotely now. So in the chat, let's have a listen to your voice again. What would you choose to talk about? First, second, third. What would you choose to talk about? Now, in our experience in this situation, which is one of the ones we use in our training, is there's a half a dozen situations or circumstances or interpretations. There's a half a dozen issues, if you will, a content, a pattern, and a relationship issue that we might consider talking about. Just take a moment in the chat. What would you talk about first here? Thank you, Rachel. Pattern of missed deadlines. That's a great place to start, isn't it? Thank you for that. Jacqueline says, I will identify the pattern of behavior, ask if Matt has recognized the pattern and what he thinks is causing him to miss the deadlines. Thank you for that, Jacqueline. So it's the latest objective example about missing deadline. Bring the chat to face, away from email. Thank you, Jessica. Nice idea. Celia says it sounds like a pattern and a pre-existing relationship. So relationship might be a good place to start. I'm with you. That sounds great. Talk about what's not negotiable. Thank you, Clem. That's fantastic. Bradley says, ask questions about his perception of the impact of his actions. Nice little bit of reflection in that moment. Thanks for that, Bradley. Noriko says, first, share what has happened, observed, and share the patterns of behavior. Thank you for that too. Gina, thank you, Gina. Start with my intention to succeed and work well together, and then dive into the facts and ask him how he feels we could get a better outcome. Thank you, my friend. Matt says, pattern of missed deadlines too. Good on you, Matt. Thank you, my friend. Bonnie says, identify the pattern. Yes. Does he understand the assignment and what the importance might be of those deadlines? What has the impact been for missing deadlines? Beautiful. Gary says there is a possible skills gap, of course, issue here where Brad may not be comfortable to admit to, preventing the output expected of him. Nicely said, Gary. And of course, yeah, the manager may actually have a skills gap as well. There could be skills gap all over the place. Carolyn, thank you. Address the pattern of using humour. Nice to deflect the conversation. Raylene, request a face-to-face. One, ask if we are agreed, mutual purpose, endeavouring to achieve the same goals. Two, state what you have noticed. Miss deadlines. Three, state what you need and ask what might need to achieve the deadline. Very nicely done. Excellent. Wonderful contributions. Thank you very much. Well, let's have a quick look at this one. This is how we would quickly give you some dot points to consider. On the content, pattern, and relationship levels, you have to ask the question, which is the right conversation or the most effective conversation, to use my language. Effective meaning moving towards the results that matter here. And of course, what we often do, and fortunately, we've got some wonderful practitioners in this group here today. Thank you so much for your excellent contributions. I would expect nothing less of some of our finest graduates. Nevertheless, there are challenges in where you start and then challenges in navigating all of this, these issues, arguably over time. Look, to be honest, I would typically, if there's enough maturity in the relationship and enough safety in the relationship, we would always commend you to typically start with the relationship and the pattern issues. The truth is, many people, when they don't feel safe or the relationship is less well developed, then they would go for content and maybe step their toe into pattern, often missing relationship altogether. Susan says here, one team, be curious about why the pattern is happening. Explain result of behavior. Absolutely, Susan, thank you. Curious is a very powerful word, and you're spot on there. So let's have a quick look moving us forward about that very curiosity. So most persistent, resistant, and of course, these problems are caused by a failure to address issues in these lower levels, if you like, beneath the surface, the content issue, the latest missed deadline. And those pattern and relationship issues are where most of our leverage lies. All right, I'm going to move us forward. So this is the second skill, which is unique to crucial conversations for accountability. We don't teach this skill, and a couple of others, we don't teach this in mastering dialogue. We only teach it in crucial conversations for accountability. Now, this has come from the best part of 30 or 40 years of research and application and refinement and development in the social and behavioral sciences, this diagnostic lens, if you will. And it's one that we teach in crucial conversations for accountability, that we ask our participants to internalize and then go practice. So it gives them a skill set, a personal skill set that they use on a daily, weekly frequency when they experience disappointment, misunderstanding, disagreement, for example, in their relationships at home, in their community, with their neighbours and friends, also, of course, very much so in the workplace, whether they're in a mining operation, a not-for-profit community care organisation, a bank, of course, in financial services, or a government agency. It doesn't matter the nature of the organisation. So, diagnosis. I think, Susan, you said it nicely. Curiosity is what governs whether we ever get into this skill set of diagnosis. So that shift in mindset from judging harshly the situation, to getting curious about the variety of causes. Here we go. Some of you may be familiar with root cause analysis, for example. Now, root cause analysis, this is the closest thing that I'm going to offer you right today. Here we go. So this is Jericho, and introducing you to Jericho, he confronts one of his colleagues. Now, they don't report to each other, but they need each other. They collaborate. So Jericho is going to confront Andrew, and he's got his colleague Esther with him, about being late on an assignment. Now, you're going to hear Jericho sort of well and truly, I guess, hold him accountable, but he does it in a very poor way. So why does Jericho think Andrew missed the deadline, Andrew and his team? Why does he think he missed the deadline? And how does that conclusion affect the interaction? So please add your thoughts and interpretations in the chat again as you listen to this. Here we go.
We should definitely do targeted ads.
Definitely. I think that's good, especially next to...
There you are.
What's up?
You know the design from the marketing campaign you said you'd send me last week? Well, I still don't have it. A simple design, it wasn't that big of an ask. Do I have to keep coming here and bugging you until you get it?
Look, I'm sorry, all right?
Yeah, you're sorry, but that doesn't get me the design. I need it now.
So, friends, add your thoughts to the chat. Well, if you were in Jericho's shoes, how are you thinking about this situation? What's your interpretation? What mindset have you carried in to that interaction? How is this going to affect their working relationship going forward? What are your thoughts? Add them to the chat. Dare I ask, have you ever seen anything like that before? You ever been involved? You ever been in Jericho? Have you ever done a Jericho on somebody? A work colleague, a family member? Have you ever experienced Jericho? So Raylene says, thank you. Jericho's frustrated, under pressure, and he engaged with accusations. Wow, rather than curiosity. Thank you, Raylene. Rachel says, yes, Rachel, assumptions. Intentionally missed. His ask is not important. His task is not important, etc. Yeah, of course, I'll play the clip again. Here we go. Let's have another shot. Let's see this again. Here we go.
We should definitely do targeted ads.
Definitely. I think that's good, especially next to...
There you are.
What's up?
You know the design from the marketing campaign you said you'd send me last week? Well, I still don't have it. A simple design, it wasn't that big of an ask. Do I have to keep coming here and bugging you until you get it?
Look, I'm sorry, all right?
Yeah, you're sorry, but that doesn't get me the design. I need it now.
Needless to say, most of you have made some rather obvious comments in the chat. So I'm not going to read them in the interest of our time. We've got a bit to get through just yet. So, but most of you are absolutely spot on in your interpretations of Jericho. So let's have a look. And of course, the consequences in their ongoing relationship. And I have no doubt that each and every one of you on the call today have experienced moments like this, where quite literally you want to spend less time with the Jerichos of the world. So, you focus on what you need to do, and we spend less time collaborating and more time apart. So many people do this. Of course, we think of our immediate tasks and goals. We become very self-focused, and we're not really that focused on building truly effective, enduring relationships and collaborating with one another. Okay, keep the comments coming in as I keep us moving along. So Jericho has a fairly simplistic model of human behavior. He kind of only considers Andrew's personal motivation when diagnosing the gap. As far as Jericho's concerned, Andrew just doesn't care enough about Jericho's needs. And maybe he's just plain lazy. Okay, maybe he's a little incompetent. But at the start of it, it's all about personal motivation. And for those of you who have got a psychology background, a lot of organisational psychologists would commonly refer to this as the fundamental attribution error. Fundamental attribution error. Feel free to go and do some research on that, or of course, you can read the book. There's lots of things that you could do in order to extend your knowledge in this particular space. And your understanding, of course, you could come along to the training as well. So this is fundamental attribution error. So let's have a look at what this might mean. We quickly attribute poor behavior to selfish motives. Failure to deliver, selfish motive, which makes us deeply ineffective at discussing and influencing behavior about the gap, and even encouraging and enabling me and others to close the gap so we don't have to deal with it again. So here's where the science comes in. This huge body of evidence-based research and application over the last, at least last 15, 20 years, but more beyond that, of course, back into the 90s. So the using of these 6 sources of influence, this is a powerful diagnostic and conversational tool. It's the foundation for truly effective dialogue when it comes to closing these gaps. So this is the extension that we take in with Crucial Conversations for Accountability. Let's have a good look at this. So expanding the model beyond just what motivates and enables. So you and I typically do what we do in most circumstances, and certainly in circumstances when we're disappointed or in disagreement or misunderstood, we do what we do because we want to and we can. We're motivated and we're able to. We call these 2 sources the personal sources of influence. It's what's inside me. They're internal. I'm motivated and I'm able. And in most cases, I've got both running very well. I want to and I can. So personal motivation, we help our friends understand that when left in a room by themselves, asking these kinds of internal questions. Do I want to engage in the behavior? Do I enjoy it, hate it? Do I find meaning in it? Does it align with my sense of purpose and who I think I am and who I want to be? Pretty powerful questions. And they help us be less, animated, more curious, less judgmental. Those questions draw us into curiosity. I'm preparing myself to be at my best as I engage with Andrew about the gap, the disappointment. Personal ability, when left in a room by yourself, do I have the requisite knowledge, skills, experience, and strength, resilience, if you will, to do what's most valuable, most helpful, even when it might be the hardest? Now let's expand the model into including the social system, the culture of your enterprise or your team. It's the people around you, and of course that includes you as a member of that social group, that operating system, which has its own rules, both written in policy and various other elements, but also, of course, unwritten. There are a lot of unwritten rules in human systems that either encourage or discourage the appropriate skill, behavior, way of thinking, etc. Let's look at the 4th source of influence, which of course is, do other people actually help? Do they help with information? Do they help with their availability and their time, their presence? Do they help by listening? And do they help by coaching and supporting? So we're talking now about peer pressure, teamwork, if you want to call it that. Let's look at the next one. Now we're talking about structural motivation. We're talking about the non-human elements of the economy and the environment, sources 5 and 6. So rewards and punishment, and of course, structures, environments, tools, and information. As you can see here, these are non-human in terms of the artifact. So for example, this book and the technology that we are using right now to communicate with each other, even though we're human beings engaging with it, but the internet, our computers, our phones, our tablets, and this artifact, they are in fact the physical world, the non-human world. So 6 sources of influence, not one, but 6. And so getting curious about and getting skillful in using this way of examining what's going on between Lynn and Mari, between, of course, Jericho and Andrew and Esther. Very, very powerful at a personal and a professional level. So this notion of diagnosing what's causing the gap. And by the way, it's never, almost never in my experience, just one source. It's almost always multiple sources. And what we've learned is to close the gap. If you want to increase your likelihood of successfully closing the gap and not being annoyed, frustrated, disappointed in the future, typically you need to use all 6 sources, at least a minimum of 4 working in combination, and you'll get that tenfold improvement in closing gaps. So let's bring this to life a little bit now with a wonderful example from our good friend Maria Moss, one of our master trainers. Maria is going to give you a beautiful example of how this works out. Now, it's in a healthcare setting, in a hospital with a doctor. We'll call him Dr. John, and Nurse Lisa. So let's listen to to Maria, the great example of how this is powerful to use it in advance of the conversation, is how Lisa uses it, but also during the conversation with the doctor involved, in this case, John. Let's have a listen. Curious to get your feedback as we go along in the chat, but also at the end. Here we go. Sorry about the small delay. Here we go.
Understanding the 6-source model isn't enough. The key is to use it in preparation for and during crucial conversations. We once watched a nurse do this remarkably well. She was approached by a doctor who came up to her in a hurry and said,
"Nurse, forget it. I won't learn your name until you've been here 2 years anyway. I need an ABG in 207.
Now, if you were that nurse, how are you feeling about that doctor right now? What story would you be telling yourself about him right now?
What? You insensitive, arrogant jerk?
Well, here's what that nurse did. She walked away, carried out the order, and then returned very civilly, very professionally, saying,
Doctor, I took care of that ABG.
Good.
Oh, and there's one other thing I wanted to check with you.
how could she be so civil? Why was she so calm? Because she knew how to diagnose. She knew how to challenge the immediate story in her head and look for other explanations for his behavior. This is the first step in using the 6-source model, using it to prepare your mind and emotions. The nurse first took a mental pause to diagnose hypothetically in her mind. This is crucial. Rather than assuming the doctor had bad motives, she considered whether it could be an ability issue, whether social influences could be involved. She even quickly thought, my badge was inadvertently turned backwards. Maybe that frustrated him. That was a structural influence. After diagnosing mentally, her story began to change and her emotions followed. She was more curious and less angry. Now, she wasn't justifying his behavior, but she was preparing herself to be in the best position to discuss it. She then went on to have the conversation.
What?
Well, when we spoke earlier, you said, I'm not gonna learn your name until you've been here 2 years. And at first, I was put off by that. But then I thought, maybe he has a reason for acting that way. Can you help me understand what you meant?
You see, she's diagnosing.
Nurses come and go so quickly around here. It's hard for me to know who I can rely on. It's also hard for me to read the names on the badges. The letters are pretty small. I guess I was pretty short with you. I'm sorry.
Sure, he behaved insensitively, but why? Is it because he's an offensive creep? Or was there more going on? As she diagnosed, she started to see a doctor frustrated by high nursing turnover who also had trouble reading small print. He was a reasonable person having a bad moment.
Well, I can see how that can be frustrating. My name is Lisa, and you can count on me.
I'm Dr. Hobbs. John. I appreciate that. Thanks.
You're welcome.
When we diagnose, we are better able to step up to the conversation because we have mastered our emotions. And we're better able to navigate the conversation because we have a clear way of thinking about the human behavior that is causing the gap. One last note on diagnosing. We want to be clear that diagnosing is not excusing. When we ask, why did you do this? Sometimes we get back a list of this and that and that and this, and blah, blah, blah. So how do you tell the difference between a reason and an excuse? Well, you get to be the judge. But you can't be an informed judge if you don't have all the possible information in front of you. Allowing others to share their view on contributing causes for their behavior doesn't rob you of the chance to decide what is and isn't valid. It actually empowers you with information you may not have otherwise had. So, as you diagnose and others share, suspend judgment. Listen. Ask questions to understand. If you worry that they might mistake your questions for acceptance, let them know that isn't the case. You might say, for example, I intend to give this some thought and decide how I see things. But before I do, I want to hear everyone out. Can't do the job because you don't have the right software? Great, let's get you that software. Can't do it because coworkers are distracting you? Great, let's move where you sit. Dog ate your homework? Call me skeptical. Here's the second thing to remember. When dealing with excuses, have the conversation about that. Make that the topic of the conversation. For example, say, I've been trying to get my son, recently graduated from college and back home, living in the basement to apply for jobs. Actual jobs with actual salaries that could pay actual rent for his own apartment. Now, we've talked about it and he's shared a lot of barriers. We've worked collaboratively to address and eliminate those barriers. And he is still sitting on my couch downstairs playing video games. It's time for a different conversation. One that sounds more like, when we've talked about you applying for jobs, you've given me a lot of reasons for why you haven't been doing it. I've worked with you to address those, and I think we've eliminated most of them. But you're still not applying. This makes me think that those reasons you shared before maybe weren't reasons. They were more like excuses. So can you help me understand what's going on? Suddenly, it's a totally different conversation. One that, if handled well, will strengthen your relationship with increased trust and honesty. So remember, diagnosing is not excusing, and listening is not agreeing. Use this 6-source model to help you gather more information so you can make an informed decision about how to address the problem.
Wonderful, Maria. Thank you so much for that. Folks, can I encourage you to add your thoughts to the chat? What impressions did you gain? What did you take away from that experience? What is the nugget? What's I guess the key takeaway from that for you? Just add your thoughts to the chat. I'll give you a minute or so. Manage your own emotions first. Thank you, Jacqueline. That's great advice. Thank you, Raylene. Curiosity, calm, compassion, courage, well said, and equally challenging to muster in the moment, right? So again, so much of this comes back to practice. You might have a head full of new knowledge, a new way of doing things, a new way of being at your best when you need it the most. And yet without the practice, it becomes less accessible over time. Wow, some great advice coming through. Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I won't read them all. You can read them yourself. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Matt. Rachel, thank you so much. Clem, Marina, thank you. Celia, Natalie, thank you so much. My friend Gina, thank you. And of course, Bradley, thank you so very much. All right, so we're going to move now towards the last few minutes of our time together. 5 minutes is all it will be. And so just to reinforce that point coming out of Maria's example with John and Lisa, humans are motivated by a variety of sources. I think most of us get that, both internal and extrinsic or external. Tapping into several sources of influence at once, and you increase your chances of success, that closing of a gap, that strong, productive, respectful, and purposeful relationship, personally and professionally, by tenfold or 1,000%. That's the evidence base that we have and work with. Okay, so the course outline looks like this. The first day is predominantly focused on, for the 2-day program anyway, it is focused on all the dialogue skills that some of you will be very familiar with mastering dialogue. And you can see the principles and the modules that are all very similarly named. Where things shift is on the second day of the 2-day program significantly. And of course, that is the diagnose, make it easy. That's the ability sources of influence, numbers 2, 4, and 6 on the model, and make it motivating, sources number 1, 3, and 5. And this is conversational, right? So it's you having this conversation, you're working out with the person in your life where there is a gap, how you and they are going to close it. Not just them on their own, but you and others supporting and enabling and encouraging and empowering them to do so, working with you. And of course, we finish off with the wonderful, obvious one, move to action. So in the interest of our time, let's have again a quick look at the skills learned through this particular program. You can see them there quite easily. Feel free to take a screenshot if you really need these sorts of things. And of course, you can always reach out to us. So how do we work with you? That's the next quick question that most people ask us. We have our public programs. So the 2-day public program is terrific. We do that in-house or we do that in a public form. Now, of course, we've got our October public programs coming up. First 2 days, Crucial Conversations for Mastering Dialogue. And the third day, having completed Mastering Dialogue, you get the 1-day extension or add-on program in Accountability. And what we do there is we just do a quick refresh of the Mastering Dialogue skill, and then we certainly focus most of the day on the diagnosis, make it easy, make it motivating extension modules. Of course, we want to encourage as many people as possible to become certified internal trainers so that you can deliver for your organization at a time and a place that's convenient for you, but also the cost reduces significantly, of course, because it's your own internal staff doing that. It's a very, very popular approach that we offer there. So pretty much we are done. I will just produce the last little slide. It's a big thank you slide. And basically, if you would like more, please reach out to either myself or Josh Marshall, our general manager, and we'd be delighted to have a conversation with you on any of our programs, particularly today, of course, Crucial Accountability or Crucial Conversations for Accountability. Now, the other thing I would encourage you to do is if you're interested, we have a brilliant ebook which is available to you, having come to the webinar. It's called Mind the Gap. Mind the Gap, and it's the essential guide to workplace accountability. 22 pages. It's essentially what we've gone through and a whole lot more, plus the research that underpins it all. If you would like a copy of Mind the Gap, simply just reach out to myself or Josh Marshall. You've got our details on the screen there. So that's the best thing to do is capture that screen. I'll leave it up for a little bit longer and just reach out to us. Send me a text message or send me a quick email and I'll make sure that that's in your inbox before the end of the week. So folks, that brings us to 11:44, almost 45 on the dot. It's been a pleasure spending some time with you this morning. I wish you every success in your endeavors to develop a culture of accountability in your team or organization. Just remember, as we started, your job as a leader is to develop accountable people. Okay. So have a wonderful rest of the week, and I look forward to engaging with you at any time that's convenient for you. Bye for now. Thank you very much.